All right.
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the info session for the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. We'll give, supposed to start at 11. We'll give people another minute and then we'll bring the slides up on the screen. So today we're going to go over the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, some of the changes that were made to the program, some of the things that remained the same about the program, to let everybody know about the application window that has just opened. And then we'll leave it open for questions and answers, Q&A session upon conclusion of going through the slides, which will be made available, by the way, both in English and in Spanish. So yeah, we're just bringing up the slides now. So as everybody comes in, welcome. Happy to see you all here.
Can you all see the screen?
I can.
Okay, great. And then, yeah, Ruben, just let me know when you want me to transition and I will do that.
Okay, sounds good. All right, it's 11:05, so we will go ahead and get started. So again, welcome everybody. Happy to see you all here. We're going to go over the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, give everybody a little bit of a program overview of it for the year 2024. It has changed a little bit in the 7 years since its inception, so we'll go over that. And again, we'll discuss some of the things that are the same, and then we'll have a Q&A session afterwards. So next slide, please. And just to give everybody a little bit of a heads up, I'm sorry, I need to actually do my introduction. So my name is Ruben Wadi. I am my company's name is SummerCore, and we are a program administrator for the city of Chicago to administer the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. I personally have been with the program for about 7 years. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. So I'm the Vice President, NOF Program Director, and today I am joined by Joshua Sun, who is from the city side, the Program Administrator for the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, and then I'm joined by my colleague Kelly Hanfield and Johnny Burnett. So we're all very pleased to meet you, and I will also give out my contact information as well as some other generalized contact information so that you all know how to reach me and how to reach out. So thanks a lot. So for the NOF, today we're going to be going over in general what it is, as well as the structure of the grant. I want to make sure that whoever's on this call, at the end of the call, we understand exactly how the NOF is dispersed. And then if there's still additional clarifications that are needed, again, we're going to be having a Q&A session, and I will make myself available for calls and emails in the preceding weeks, of course. So yes, we will be going over what the NOF is and how it is structured. We're going to go over a few best practices in terms of how to apply for the program. I think that's relatively topical because the applications opened up last week. So we're hoping that each and every one of you will be applying for the program. We're going to be talking about location eligibility, aka the corridors that we use to determine location eligibility. We're going to be talking about some eligible project types. So that's going to include what is eligible within the project scope itself, and then or the type of business that I should say, and then eligible expenses within the project costs. And then from there, we're going to highlight how applications are evaluated to give you all the arm you all with the best information as to what we like to see on applications or what you should make sure to include on applications. We'll go over some common application mistakes. There have been quite a few applications that have come my way through the NOF program, hundreds or thousands, I should say. There is a trend for what people tend to miss on these applications. And I want to make sure that everybody here is aware of that to avoid those mistakes and to make clarifications on your application as necessary. We will talk a little bit about eligibility tiers within the applications themselves, as well as a new CDFI assistance program. And then we will, in general, go into detail about how to apply for it for this grant, what link to follow, what platform to sign up for. All of that will be made, will be made clear upon the end of this presentation. So next slide, please. So briefly, what is the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund? It's an economic development tool meant to catalyze investment on the south, southwest, and west sides of Chicago, just as it was instituted in the year 2016 and opened in the year 2017. So that has not changed. It's meant to spark, or it's meant to help make commercial corridors vibrant or even more vibrant. And it's funded by something called the Neighborhood Opportunity Bonus, which funds 80% the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, and then it funds two other programs as well. So yes, it's funded by the Neighborhood Opportunity Bonus, which is fueled by downtown development. And specifically, these grants support commercial construction and rehabilitative projects. And it does that through a reimbursement model and an escrow model. So again, the program has changed, but its mission, its core tenets, and the way that it's distributed have remained the same. Next slide, please. So we'll just get right into some of the numbers associated with the NOF grant. This is a grant for up to $250,000 for new construction, renovations, and/or acquisition for existing businesses, startup businesses, or cultural establishments. Once an applicant is selected into the program and they would like to start receiving funding, the money can be paid out either as a reimbursement for costs that you pay to the contractor, or it's paid through a construction escrow where payments are handled directly to the contractor. And the major difference between the two is that for the reimbursement model, you would have to have most of the money available for the project, if not all of it, and then you get paid on the back end in phases or at the end of the project. But for construction escrow, you would only need to come up with your gap in the financing. And these are things that, again, I'd be more than happy to go into much more detail about, but that is how the grants are paid out. So projects that are selected into the NOF program might also qualify, or will also qualify for an additional 20% on top of their grant, not inclusive, on top of the construction grant for technical assistance fees relating to project managers and architects. So that is it's a component that has changed from NOF. It was there, it still is there, but now it's just being expanded a little bit. So we have a separate pot of funds for technical assistance provisions. The application process itself is competitive and it's based off the details of the application, which again, we will go into. Anybody that's accepted into the program is expected to complete their project within 2 years. We can always look into what your timeline is looking like at any given moment and see what can be done in terms of helping the project along. But if you're selected, let's say in 2025, Q1 2025, the expectation is that the project will be complete by Q1 or Q2 2027. A note on acquisition. Acquisition is indeed an eligible expense for the program, but you cannot just apply for the grant for acquisition. So if you want to just use the grant to leverage towards an acquisition with a lender, we wouldn't be able to do that. But if you want to acquire property and rehab it, then acquisition becomes eligible. Next slide, please. So what exactly is new? I've mentioned that the grant has made a few changes, so I want to go into that in a little bit of detail. Again, the technical assistance program has been around, but it is changing. So we can pay out for technical assistance up to 20% of an applicant's grant amount. So just to use simple math, if your grant amount is 100,000, you can get an additional $20,000 because 20% of 100,000 is $20,000, and that 20,000 can be applied for technical assistance. The 20,000 wouldn't be included in the 100,000. So this is additional to the grant for construction, and it can be leveraged towards hiring project managers and architects from a pre-selected list that we are working on. So it's not necessarily available just now, but it will be available in the coming months. Originally, the grant was a 50%, it had a 50% reimbursement or escrow rate. That has increased to 75% to allow for additional capital injection into projects. We discovered that for a lot of applicants that were not able to complete their projects or weren't selected, it was really a lot of the times it was the financing component. So instead of us just doing 50%, we're changing that to 75%. Yeah, we're just allowing for more capital injection. So I think that's probably the biggest change for NOF. It used to be 50%, now it's 75%. And additionally, we're establishing a loan loss reserve to where pre-selected CDFIs will be able to underwrite additional loans or at least commitment letters because of the existence of this loan loss reserve to applicants that were not selected for the program and are looking to reapply with additional financing. And I should clarify, not selected on the basis of having the necessary financing. A CDFI can potentially work with that applicant to secure additional financing, or at the very least, have a commitment letter presented to them to reapply for the NOF program. Additionally, CDFIs can work with people that have already been selected into the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, and they can underwrite a loan that could be leveraged into one of our deadlines called proof of financing. These tools are largely complete in terms of operationalization, but we're going to have more details, namely the actual list of the CDFIs. Just like with the Technical Assistance Program, we're still working on that list, and I'd be more than happy to answer additional questions about that. But we really want this Loan Loss Reserve Program to be a powerful tool to help people secure the financing that they needed, because as mentioned, financing has been a concern for a lot of past applicants. We want to bridge that gap with the help of community development, I should say, I'm going to say CDFIs, community development financial institutions. So we're partnering with them in hopes of getting more projects to be completed and alleviating financial burden for applicants so that they have additional capital for after the construction project for things like equipment and wage expenses. Next slide, please. So who's involved? So this is a little bit of an extension of the introductions. So these funds originate from the Department of Planning and Development, DPD, and it has been since its inception. DPD works with Summer Corps, who I'll go over in a moment, and NOF finalists, recipients, grantees, other departments in assistance of helping with NOF clients. DPD is the originator of these funds, so they can help out in a number of different ways by facilitating communications with the client. Summer Corps is the primary program administrator. So myself and Kelly will be the points of contact for those that are selected into the program. And also, if people have questions about the application itself, they can also come to us at Summer Corps. So we're responsible for assisting the grantees from with determining what how to apply for the grant, as in, like, we can't tell someone how to apply, but what are the things that reviewers look for on the application. So we go from that all the way to helping out with grantees when they're selected into the program, all the way to remitting the final payment for a project. So we steward applicants from the very beginning to the very end, and that is Summer Corps' main role with the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. And as mentioned previously, we're introducing the CDFI program so that they can, work with applicants in securing additional financing, both in support of reapplying for NOF if you were not selected on the basis of financing, or to help meet a proof of financing deadline if they are selected into NOF. And there's more actors that are involved. I mentioned the TA program. So once we have that list, we'll make that public, just like the CDFI list, but they're also involved. We're going to have a number of project managers and technical assistants, project managers and architects that are going to be ready to assist applicants with their unique needs. Next slide, please. So I talked a little bit about eligibility. So right now, and this map is live. And if you have questions about whether or not your address is eligible, you can always reach out to myself or Kelly. But essentially, eligibility is determined by whether or not your property lies on one of two corridors, NOF priority corridors and NOF eligible corridors, as we're calling them. For those that are familiar with the program, these used to be called eligible commercial corridors and primary investment corridors. We're just calling them priority corridors and eligible corridors now. So at least on the map, we are on the map key. So just keep that in mind. So your project has to be located on an eligible commercial corridor or primary investment corridor, or as the map says, priority corridors and eligible corridors. You can just put your address into the map and it'll tell you whether or not your whether or not your address is located on one of these corridors. If you are having trouble determining whether or not it's an eligible commercial corridor or primary investment corridor, then you can just reach out to me and I'll help you interpret it. But yeah, that tool is available right now if you'd like to look into it. And the whole idea behind these corridors, which are the same as they were on the previous NOF map, is to focus the investment in areas that have been historically disinvested. So that's why the focus is on the southwest, and west sides of Chicago. And you can also see the southeast side there as well. You can see South Shore and South Chicago on this map. You can also see Pullman and Roseland on the far south. So there's a little bit of southeast representation there too. But again, if you have questions about the map itself, you can always reach out to me and I can help you with interpreting it. I will say that the map might change in the future. And if that happens, we will inform everybody about that. So this might be receiving some tweaks. It might also be staying the same. So just stay tuned. So I say all this to say, if you start your application with this map, but then you come back to the application, you realize the map has changed, let me know. And I'll help you sort through whatever it is it may be. But these are the eligible locations. You might have heard about the qualified investment area in the past. We're really focusing on the priority and eligible corridors right now. Next slide, please. So eligible projects, this is a commercial grant, and it's of course focused on rehabbing commercial properties, standalone commercial properties or mixed use. So we can do commercial property owners with known business uses. If you're doing a vanilla box project, but you have a tenant in mind and you have an agreement with the tenant and the tenant does the finishing and whatnot that they need to do, then that is okay. But if you're just applying to this grant and you want a vanilla box for any business and you're just vanilla boxing it to put it up for a lease, but you have no idea who the tenant will be, that's what we're going to call a little speculative, because it is important to know what the end use is. We need to know whether or not it's a restaurant or it's a cafe, or it's a retail shop, like a clothing store. Yeah, we need to know exactly what is going on, because that is important. Because there's a difference in types of businesses that are eligible for NOF. So that's one of the reasons we don't just allow for vanilla box projects that don't have a predetermined lessee who is going to be doing some of the finishing and helping out to complete the project. More eligible projects are, you don't just have to be a property owner. You can lease out the space and build it out with landlord approval. So we allow for commercial business tenants. Nonprofit organizations providing a revenue generating commercial activity to the public. So basically, if you're a nonprofit and you're just doing social services, but that's not tied to an actual commercial activity, then that's not going to be eligible. But if it is tied to a commercial activity, then it is. One good example for a past NOF applicant that met these requirements for the commercial activity is Wings on 63rd Street. They applied for and successfully got the grant, and we built out their retail store that was associated with Wings program mission and vision. I encourage you to check them out, actually. And then nonprofits or businesses building or renovating a cultural establishment. So this kind of ties into the commercial activity to the public point above. Ineligible uses include residential properties, home-based businesses, and live workspaces. I get a lot of questions about whether or not somebody's home business is eligible. I'm just going to be straight up, it's not. It's not eligible for the program, mostly by virtue of the fact that it is a residential building. Um, so we don't do purely residential. We can do mixed use. And we can even do the exterior of mixed use buildings, not the interior apartments, but we can do the exterior of mixed use buildings. But if you're looking to make rehabilitation to your home that you work from, you have a home-based business, that's just not eligible. Manufacturing or industrial businesses or properties are also not eligible for the grant. Like I alluded to, social service organizations without a commercial component are not eligible, as well as schools or daycare centers. And then finally, churches and places of worship. Now, we have allowed clients in the past that are churches, but they're not building out their church. They actually are building out a commercial, a revenue generating commercial activity business. They're building out a business, but they're just applying under the name of a church. So I did want to make that distinction clear. But if you are a church and you're applying to build out your church, that's not going to be eligible. Next slide, please. So for eligible expenses, the primary thing to think about with NOF is if it stays in the building after you leave, then it's eligible. So we can do minor site improvements as part of an eligible project. Basically, what this means is, so let me just say we can do things like roofing, facade, and mechanical system repairs, HVAC, plumbing, and electrical. That falls into the category that I just described of if it stays with the building after you leave, then it's eligible. Minor site improvements we can do as long as it's part of an eligible project that includes the things that I just kind of mentioned, as well as demolition and environmental remediation and building acquisition. Those are all parts of an eligible project to where minor site improvements will be okay. But if you're looking to just apply for a $500 painting job, that's not going to be eligible. We can do security measures, and then we can also cover architectural and engineering fees. I will, for those that have picked up on the fact that we've said that we have a technical assistance program that covers architectural expenses, but we're also covering that here in this section. I'd be happy to go over that distinction because there is a distinction between the technical assistance for architectural services and program managers, project managers, I'm sorry, and then architectural engineering fees as part of an eligible project. So if you picked up on that, I'd be more than happy to explain it, to explain it to you because there is a bit of a distinction. Ineligible expenses, I mentioned the minor repairs. So if you're just doing, just some minor repairs to the wall, some minor painting, that's not going to be eligible unless there's a larger project. We do not cover the interior residential part of a mixed-use building. We can cover the exterior of a mixed-use building. If your building has major code violations, like the type of code violations where an inspector comes out and says this presents a danger to the public because the parapet wall is about to fall off, then we cannot use the city funds for it. I will say that's very easily checked online. So if you are looking to acquire a building, let's say, I would definitely make sure that there aren't, and you want to apply the NOF grant to it, please make sure that you're checking whether or not it has some building code violations. You can also check the recorder of deeds to make sure that there's no injunctions or liens. Those are only really issued when there's an issue with the actual building itself to the point where the Department of Law had to be involved. So yeah, if it's like a refuse issue, like pick up the trash, that's okay. You can still apply for the grant with minor stuff like that. But if the facade of the building is about to collapse and you're applying for this grant for emergency funds to get it up to code, that will not be a proper application of the NOF funds. We do not cover our operating expenses and travel or lodging hotel expenses. So those are some of the expenses that we do not cover. And again, I'm always on hand to, because these project scopes can say things in a different way. I'd be happy to sort of walk through those. Next slide, please. So yeah, so as stated previously, we'll go over this very briefly. 250 for construction, 75% of eligible hard costs, and then for the separate technical assistance fund, 20% of the grant amount up to 50,000, 20% because 50,000 is 20% of 250,000, so that's why we are saying 20%. You can only work with selected CA providers, and for architecture and project management. So again, we already mentioned this previously, but we're just going over it again. Next slide, please. So just for a little bit of insight into the technical assistance program, by project managers, we mean people that are legitimately going to manage the project. A lot of you are small business owners that are busy enough operating your business along with everything else going on. One of the pain points for clients in the past has been access to a project manager that can help them talk to the GC, manage payments, manage the permitting process, and things of that nature. They come in all sorts of prices. So we created this separate TA program with a separate fund to help cover those expenses that are aligned with the NOF project. So project managers are definitely very helpful. Even the most sophisticated business owner that has managed 10 construction projects still hires a project manager because they can be the difference between completing your project or not. But you still want to make sure your project manager is an advocate for you because ultimately it is your project. And you want to find somebody that's going to match your vision and provide input as to how you can achieve that vision. Same thing with architects. Since the NOF grant can go up to 250, we do get quite a few projects that are larger in scope, like $400,000, $500,000. When that happens, having an architect is almost a necessity because you're more than likely going to need a permit unless it's like a $500,000 flooring project. But most projects that are that scope need a permit, and most of them need a building permit, not just a repair and replace permit. You need an architect for that. And so we're going to have a list of technical assistance providing architects that will be helping you out with getting permit ready drawings. But again, you want to, since they come in all sorts of prices and whatnot, even with the availability of the grant, you want to make sure that you're talking to as many architects as you can to find the right partner that'll work with your project to completion in a timely fashion. Because again, we said we want these projects completed in 2 years. We really do want these projects completed in 2 years. These are the two types of TAs that can help you with that. Next slide, please. So this is just a little explainer on how the grant itself is calculated. I won't spend too much time here. Again, this presentation will be made available, but this is just a little bit of insight into how the grant itself is calculated. We took into account eligible expenses and ineligible expenses to make that distinction. So for instance, furniture, fixtures, and equipment are largely ineligible. You can always talk to me about equipment that could be eligible, like walk-in coolers and kitchen hoods, maybe even booths that are bolted into the ground, or actually a part of the ground, like a part of the foundation. So we can always discuss furniture, fixtures, and equipment as being eligible. But this just assumes that all the FFE available is not eligible. So you can just see 120,000 project costs, 100,000 total eligible expenses. We take 75% of the eligible expenses, and your grant amount is 75,000, either paid out as a reimbursement or paid out to the contractor via escrow. Next slide, please. All right, so how are applications evaluated? We really go by three factors here, and my apologies. I don't know if the slides are showing up for everybody, or if all the content for the slides is showing up for everybody. But basically, we look at whether or not the project itself is ready, and then we look, so we look at certain readiness factors like site control. I will say this: site control is super important. If you're applying to this program and you just have a letter of intent and you will only have a letter of intent for the program, then that's not going to be eligible. We're looking for somebody that is either leasing the space. We're looking for a 5-year lease, but we can look at other leases and other leasing situations. Or we're looking for the deed slash title for the property. So if it's just a letter of intent that you wrote to the landlord saying, I intend to lease this property at some point in the future, that's not going to be eligible. But if you have an actual lease, right, then that will be eligible. A lot of applicants have submitted LOIs. That's a letter of intent. And we'll probably get more applications that select that submit an LOI, and we will just kindly let them know that you'll need actual site control and to actually be eligible for the program. So again, site control is super important. I just wanted to belabor that a little bit. So thank you. We want applicants to secure about 50% of the total eligible project costs by the time that they apply. The more, the better. But if there's an applicant that says they might have like 10 to 25% of the financing, that's going to be a situation where that applicant is more than likely forwarded to a CDFI, so that they can improve their financing for to apply the next time. And by the way, this is a rolling application system. So if you are not selected for a specific quarter, you can always reapply to try and be selected again. And we will do our best to inform applicants on why exactly their application was not selected. It's pretty self-explanatory most of the times, like, oh, it's not in an eligible location. We'll just tell you it's not in an eligible location. Or you demonstrated 0% financing. We'll just tell you it's because you provided 0% financing. So we'll do our best in that regard to let everybody know why they did not get selected for the program. The second factor is realization. So we want people to actually think deeply about their project, right? So do you have bids from a contractor? Do you have design documents? Do you have a budget and timeline? And if you're a startup, do you have a business plan? Do you have a leadership team summary? These are the types of things that we're going to be looking for in the application. If there's, let's say we're looking at two applications and they're both very competitive, but one of them has a bid that shows actual contract values from the contractor, and the other one just has guesstimated numbers, like you think HVAC is 10,000, you think roofing is 20,000. The application, all of the things being the same between the applications, the one that has the bid is the one that is more competitive than the other one that just kind of guessed how much the project would cost. So that's the type of realization we're looking for. We're just looking for people to actually think about their project and to submit documentation affirming that they understand how the project will be and that they have a mission and vision really for the project and that they can complete it within the 2 years that we're allowing for. And the third one is community impact. And this one is important because these communities ultimately will be selecting the projects in a way with their support. So the more support that you get from a community, the more we know that this community has selected this project. So that could be, if your community has a design, it has a community plan, does it fall within the plan? Some communities do, the plan is going to be different, or the way that the plan is going to be different. So just any integration that you thought of would be great to demonstrate. Letters of support from community members or elected officials is always a great way to show support. Yeah, maybe even a plan for outreach with your community, like after your project is done, what are some different ways you're going to engage the community? It's important that there is a level of integration between the business that's applying for the grant and the actual community, because it's ultimately the people within that area, within that community that are going to support this business, so along with those, everybody within Chicago. So we want to see that there was some significant thought put in this area. Um, because in a sense, that's the community saying, yeah, we really support this project. We would really like to see it. Here's my support. I hope that they can be selected for the grant. So again, that's readiness, realization, community impact. If you have any question about it, I'd be happy to answer. Next slide, please. So some common application mistakes. There's a few more than this, but there will be prompts to upload documents, and we'll go over how to apply for the NOF in a bit. But yeah, so prompts to upload documents. So those are going to be mandatory. You won't be able to submit your application without an attachment sometimes. So what people will do is they'll create a Word document that's blank, and then they'll just put that in the application. We're going to notice that. It's just not in your best interest to upload blank documents. It's just not. So if you don't have a deed or a lease, that's all right. You're not going to be selected more than likely for the program, but at least give us the opportunity to let you know that that's why you weren't selected. But just uploading blank documents for all the prompts isn't going to be helpful, and the project's not going to be considered. So we do take the upload of documents pretty seriously. Time management. So I did mention this is a rolling application system, so you do have a lot of time to apply for the grant. In the past, we used to open up application windows in 2 to 3 months, we used to open up applications in 2 to 3 month windows. That's not the case anymore, so you don't have to rush to submit your grant. We do have a deadline date, quote unquote, in February, but that's not necessarily the last time you can apply for the program. That's just going to be for us to intake a few months worth of applications for consideration for selection. But after that, the day after the deadline, the quote unquote deadline, you can just apply for the grant because it's rolling. And then we're going to have another intake date. So think of that deadline date as an intake date, as opposed to the program is closing after mid-February. So I say all this to say there's no need to rush your application, and the platform has a save feature. So you can upload a little bit here and there, describe a little bit here and there, save it for another day, but you don't have to fill out your application in 20 minutes, upload a bunch of blank Word documents and call it a day. You don't have to do that anymore. And that kind of goes into incomplete responses. Some people will just, they'll either answer the question with they'll answer questions with not a lot of detail, or they'll just, if it's a mandatory question and they really don't know how to answer, they will just put whatever characters in there. So yeah, incomplete responses are not going to be, that's not going to help your application. And just in general, incomplete applications. So all of that really just kind of goes into the idea of an incomplete application. You didn't answer some of the questions. You uploaded some blank Word documents, or maybe it was something else where you said that there weren't any building code violations, but we looked up and there are very bad building code violations. That technically would be part of an incomplete application as well, because it wasn't, because you didn't mention the building code violations. We had to go find it out. There's more than this. These are just some of the common ones. So just synthesize all this into take the time to fill out your application, because it's a rolling application system and you don't have to worry about deadline dates. Next slide, please. So there are eligibility tiers. If you're eligible for the program, that means you scored well in every category. It's not just scoring. We look at every application and evaluate it, based off its merits. But there are going to be the eligible applications where they met all the baseline criteria for every single aspect that I talked about, the readiness, the realization, the community impact. The pipeline eligible applicants where they're not eligible to be considered for the grant, but they can be if the financing is not set up, forwarded to a community development financial institution to help out with their financing. That specifically talking about the CDFIs. Someone might have all the financing available, but they don't have site control. That's not going to be a pipeline eligible applicant. That's instead going to be ineligible, because again, you do need site control. There can't be bad building code violations or permanent injunctions and things like that. And your location has to be eligible as well. So the pipeline is really talking to the CDFI integration that I mentioned, and the ineligible applicants are just the applicants that are ineligible in those key ways that I mentioned, the site control and the location eligibility. So next slide, please. We already talked a little bit about the CDFI program, but essentially the pipeline applicants can be matched with CDFIs, and the CDFIs can potentially work with them on bolstering their finances in support of reapplying for the program or meeting the proof of financing deadline if you are selected for the program. The applicant and the CDFI can work together towards a financial solution, but there is the possibility that the CDFI and the client can't work together because maybe there are certain aspects that the CDFI doesn't cover. Like for instance, some CDFIs don't do startups. Then the CDFI can always try to pair you with another lender, either another CDFI within our universe or just another lender in general. So yeah, that's how the CDFI assistance is integrated. It's meant to help applicants and people that are selected into the program. And the reason we built it like that is because we want to make sure that everybody has the available financial tools readily available, both at the time that they apply and at the time that you potentially get the grant. And then the way that we determine whether or not there's been a successful CDFI engagement is by whether or not the CDFI issues a commitment letter to the pipeline applicant, or even better, closing documents with a promissory note. But that commitment letter lets us know that the CDFI says this applicant, can reapply for the program and their financing is in a better state. I will say this, though, even if you weren't selected for the, let's say that you become a pipeline eligible applicant, you're paired with the CDFI and you get a commitment letter and you reapply, that doesn't guarantee you'll be selected for the program. So I did just want to make that clear, but we want to make sure that the CDFI integration is readily available for everybody. And I can, of course, help out with that as necessary in terms of explaining this a little bit more. Next slide, please. So some example projects real quick. We have Natural Roots Kids Hair Salon on 1851 East 87th Street. It was a total gut rehab of a building, interior, exterior. Looks amazing. You guys should check them out. Next slide. Another holistic gut rehab interior, exterior project, Justice of the Pies, over there on 8665 South Blackstone Avenue, not too far from Stony Island. So that's on the southeast side. Actually, both of these are east side projects. Yeah, very good pies, by the way. I would check them out. Next slide, please. And then we have Duo Development in North Lawndale. So they're doing a few things, but mainly they have their coffee shop there. You can check their hours of availability online. And then they also have a small gallery that has some artwork. I'm not too sure if it's local or not, but yeah, they have a very small gallery with some seating around it so that you can admire the artwork and enjoy the coffee. It's also just a really beautiful structure as well. So yeah, I would definitely check them out too. Next slide. So how to apply. So I'll go over this. I'll go over this pretty briefly. But basically all applications are accepted on submittable.com, and you can apply today if you want. The link is live. You're able to submit an application today if you'd like. But again, tying into what I said earlier, please take your time with your application. No need to rush it. So you can create your free account on submittable.com and begin your application when prompted. If you're not ready to submit it that day, you can save it for later. Make sure to upload all the required documentation. The list is here, but also the application makes it very clear what is required for upload. And then I believe there's even a prompt to upload additional documentation that falls outside of what we mentioned that you think supports the project. Maybe you want to show us pictures of projects that you have facilitated in the past. cool, go ahead and send us that. I think that would be an excellent frame of reference, and it gives us an understanding that you have managed a construction project that can definitely work in your favor. So feel free to think outside the box with uploading documents. Always review your application for accuracy and completeness. Don't just fill out everything without double and triple checking and then submit it. Check for the major details, the minor details, check for everything. And again, the intake deadline is 11:59 p.m. on February 14th, 2025. But you can apply the very next day. You can apply the next minute. You can apply on February 15th at 12 a.m. It's just that the applications that were submitted on or before 11:59 p.m. on February 14th are going to be selected for processing at that time. But again, you can apply the very next minute if you want. Next slide, please. Again, applications are on a rolling basis. We have a list of community partners that we'll go over in a second that can help develop strong and competitive applications. And I'm also going to be reaching out to community partners to talk to their constituents. And then some community partners have mentioned that they would like to do application workshops. I'm open to doing that as well. But yeah, I plan on being fully engaged with community partners in helping them help applicants to submit strong and competitive applications. Again, I can't tell people what to put on their application. That is a conflict of interest, but I can always mention the basics and I can always guide people in the right direction in terms of those basics. We do not accept hard copy applications. We still get people that will somehow figure out a way to print out the submittable application and then fill it out and then send it in. We're not going to accept those. Please submit the applications on submittable. Don't print out the application and then submit it to the Summer Corps offices. The community partners can also potentially help with navigating the submittable platform. And again, if there's issues with accessing it, I can help with that as well. Next slide, please. This is our list of community partners. We're always looking to add to this list as well. So these are the ones that we've reached out to extremely recently, and we just had a very great meeting with them. So they're well aware of the NOF. And so a lot of them will be very willing to help you out. And again, I'll be reaching out to a lot of these folk to have meetings with their constituents and potentially workshops. The more people that ask for these community partners to have these sorts of workshops for NOF, the more that we'll know that there's an interest and will therefore set that up. But this is a list of community partners. A lot of them serve their specific geographies. So when you reach out to one, just make sure that they actually, serve your geography, because a community partner in Pullman might be a little bit limited as how they can help someone out in Austin. Next slide, please. And this is our contact information. So you can reach out to DPD directly, and then you can reach out to the folks at Summer Corps. That's our general phone number. And you can leave a message, and then you can leave a message for us. And then from there, the call will be directed to either to myself or Kelly. We make ourselves available, all the time to work with people. So yeah, please feel free to email us at the general inbox, nof@cityofchicago.org, or feel free to reach out to us via phone, and you can check out our website as well. Next slide. Oh, I believe that was it actually. So go ahead, Josh.
No, Ruben, thank you so much for that presentation. I believe the next 10 minutes we'll be looking at questions for answering live between you and Kelly. So if you want to go ahead and move into that, we can get started.
Yep.
Sounds good. So we have a couple right now. If any of you have questions, you can go ahead and send them in that Q&A feature down at the bottom. But so to start off, somebody asks, can you confirm the stipulations around mixed-use properties?
Sure. So mixed-use properties are eligible fully for the commercial part and fully for the exterior component. So if you're looking to do the entire facade and the windows and the roof of a mixed-use building, that is going to be eligible. More than likely, we wouldn't select projects that are 1 commercial floor and 9 residential floors. But for your standard 3-story first floor commercial, 2 floors residential mixed-use building in Chicago, the exterior is fully eligible. The interior of the apartments are not. So if you're looking to rehab your mixed-use building for the exterior, but you're not going to do anything to really to the commercial component, maybe you even skip out on doing a storefront renovation entirely for the commercial. Like you're just looking to do basically the facade for the mixed-use building, but it really has nothing to do with the commercial component. That's not going to be eligible. If you're looking to do bathrooms, like you need to install a new shower in the apartments, that's not eligible. Just anything within the boundaries of the actual apartment itself is not going to be eligible. But we can do the exterior of mixed-use buildings so long as the commercial component of the project is strong and solid.
All right, thank you. Next question. Are for-profit organizations eligible?
Yes, corporations, Incs, limited liability corporations. Yes.
Okay. Next one. Can you apply for more than one location?
Yes, you can. You more than likely won't receive 2 grants for 2 locations. We try to be equitable in our distribution. But if you do have 2 properties that you're looking at, feel free to apply for both of them. Just make sure to manage your expectations as to whether or not those 2 projects will be selected. It is a competitive process. Yeah, because it's a competitive process, we really don't want to select the same person twice, even if it is for 2 different properties. But not to mention, it's hard to manage 2 construction projects at the same time. It really is. I think the easiest thing to do would be to apply for one, potentially get the grant, and then complete your project there, and then apply for the other one at a later time because it's a rolling application system.
All right. If 2 partners are paying for the project out of pocket, how would they show proof of funds? Bank account statements?
Yeah, redacted bank statements work in that case. If it's just liquid, and you can show that liquid in the form of a bank statement, and it's a joint account, great. If it's not a joint account and it's 2 separate accounts, that's fine too. We would eventually have to have a conversation about who's paying for what, because that is important, especially if you're doing reimbursement, because we're reimbursing the person that paid. So let's say you have 2 partners. But one person is paying for the work, but then the other partner wants to get paid. So you have partner 1 that paid 20 grand. That's the person that gets the 15,000. But partner 2 is asking for the 15,000 and they didn't pay the 20 grand. That's probably going to present a problem because the money needs to go to the person that paid for the project. But in general, I don't see an issue with partners pooling funds together to finance the project. I would just need a little bit more insight as to how those funds will be distributed upon payment.
All right, thank you. Our next one, apologies if this was already mentioned, but if our site is not one of the marked corridors on the map, is there a point in applying? Asking because our site is very close to the marked corridors, but not exactly in one of them.
I can always double and triple check. I like to make sure that I see with my eyes whether or not a property is eligible or ineligible, so please reach out to me. I will say this. Let's say that the commercial corridor serves one block, but on the other side it doesn't. And you're applying for the property that's on the other side of the block, it's not eligible. There have been plenty of circumstances where somebody is just outside the corridor, and it never gets easier when I tell them that it's not eligible. So the corridors are the corridors, they are the boundaries. Ultimately, whether you're 10 miles away or 10 inches away, the property has to be located on the corridor.
All right. I think I might be able to answer this one, but somebody said, will attendees receive the slides and recording in a few days? I will post the link in this response right here because the presentation is on our website under applicant resources, and we're working on getting the recording up, so that should be posted soon to that same place. Okay. Next question, can this be used in tandem with the community development grant?
It cannot. It cannot be used in tandem with the community development grant, and it cannot be used in tandem with the small business improvement fund. And just in general, it probably can't be used with any other City of Chicago financing sources. We can always look at the application. We can always look at the funding sources. And we can evaluate things on a case-by-case basis, looking at the merits of the project itself. So we do afford the opportunity for you to apply. You can still apply for the grant, even if you have other grants available to you. But more than likely, you're going to have to select which grant that you would like to move forward with. But yes, in general, if you're already receiving funds from the city for the project, we want to make sure this is equitable, and we want to get those funds over to somebody else to use. Again, equitable distribution of the funds is critical here, but you can apply and you can see what happens. I still encourage you to apply even if you do have access to another grant.
I do want to add that once a project is complete, you will be able to apply again for another program after 3 years.
All right, thank you. How soon can you expect to hear from NOF after application?
That's a good question. We're still working on what that timeline looks like. I want to say that mid-March is when the first round of intakes will be announced. But since this is the first time we're doing this sort of application, rolling application system, the first intake might take a little time because we're still trying to make sure we're getting the process right. But I could say that mid-March sounds like a relatively reasonable target date, but that can 1,000% change.
All right. Do applicants need to reside in Chicago?
No. Your property needs to reside in Chicago, but you can live in Boise, Idaho.
Okay. Can the project manager be your general contractor, or should you have both?
Yes, they can be your GC. I would love to have a conversation with them about what they mean by being the project manager and the GC, because technically a GC should be trained in being a project manager in a way. So if that means that they're just going to manage the project and within the overhead and within the overhead and profit margin, okay. But if they're charging you separately to be a project manager, and they have overhead and profit, and they have general conditions, and they have GC fee, I'm going to have a lot of questions. So the answer is yes, but I need to look at the proposal.
Okay. Can you give more definition on site control?
Deed or lease. So you own the property and you have a recorded deed on the Cook County Recorder website. Very easy to check. All I have to do is put in the PIN number, look at the deed, and that's it. I can then see who is the owner of the property through that deed. It could be a warranty deed. It could be a trust document, whatever it is. It's very easy to check, but your name or your company's name that you are affiliated with needs to be on the deed, and that deed needs to be recorded. So pretty simple there. And the lease itself is also pretty self-explanatory. Again, we're looking for 5-year leases, but we will look at other leasing situations. Maybe you're mid-lease and you have it's in your 5th year, but you're looking to extend. So we'd be looking for an extension. But yeah, fully executed lease on the property, either in your name or the company's name. And you signed it and the landlord signs it, and all the initial pages are initialed, and there's a date on there, and there's actual reasonable conditions. Then yeah, that's site control. I didn't go over this, so I will. If you're doing acquisition, you might have noticed that you're applying for acquisition, so that means you can't have a deed when you apply. You can submit a fully executed purchase and sale agreement with a closing date. And if you are selected, we're absolutely holding you to that closing date. 1,000% we're holding you to the closing date. So yeah, purchase and sale agreement, fully signed, fully initialed, dated. And if you are selected with that purchase and sale agreement, that is the deadline for you to close on the property. So yeah, so deed or lease, as I described, as well as the purchase and sale agreement if this is acquisition. I'm not sure if we're going to accept redevelopment agreements because that normally means you're entering into an agreement to buy city property, which can be a very lengthy process. So I think largely we're going to stay away from those. Again, still apply. We'll look and we'll evaluate. But yeah, that's what site control means.
All right. Excuse me. With regard to acquisition, is there a minimum threshold for how much rehab is needed for the project to be eligible?
Good question. And in 7 years, I'm surprised that's the first time I'm hearing that. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Is there going to be a threshold? But let's say it's just to use extreme numbers as an example. Let's say that the acquisition is like $1 million, but you're only looking to do a $100 project for painting. We're not selecting that. But if the acquisition, if the acquisition is still the same amount, but you have like a $200,000 rehab project, that's pretty typical with NOF. And we can accept that. I mean, more than likely acquisition is not going to be $1 million, but I'm just saying that as an example. So there's not a threshold, but we're probably not selecting a project that only has rehab costs in the hundreds or like the single digit thousands, like 5,000 or 6,000.
Thank you. Are you eligible to utilize the grant for a down payment if you're looking into purchasing a commercial property?
No.
All right. Can you go over the percentage that NOF gives and how much we have to contribute?
The NOF grant can cover 75% of total project costs up to 250,000. Your contribution depends on your total project costs and your total eligible project costs, meaning that I can't answer that question right now. I can only give examples. So if your total project costs eligible are $100,000, your grant is 75,000 and your contribution is 25,000. So if you apply for the grant with that amount of project costs, we want you to demonstrate bare minimum 25%, which would be 25,000. I will say this, project costs escalate well over 90% of the time. It's extremely rare when somebody applies for a project that's 100,000 and those prices remained the exact same 2 years later. You can expect a 30% escalation. So one of the reasons we mentioned 50% of project costs is because we want people to take into account the contingency that they might need to cover cost overruns. And it also lets us know, especially if you're a startup, that you're going to have additional capital for actually operating your business. Because while this is a construction grant, we do care that the business stays in operation for years. That's kind of the point of the program. We're building these commercial corridors to spur and inspire commercial activity. So the grant doesn't really do any good if we pay for the development of the building, but then the business tops out after 6 months. So we want to make sure that there's enough financing available for contingencies and in theory for operating costs after the fact. So I have no idea what your contribution amount is going to be because I don't see the numbers. If I saw numbers in front of me, we have a conversation about potential contribution amounts. But using the baseline figures, that means that you would have to, using the baseline figures, that means you'd have to come up with at least 25%, but I guarantee those project costs are going up. I guarantee it. $100,000 can turn into 130 within a few months. And we want to make sure applicants are ready for if and when that happens by demonstrating that they have well in advance of their contribution amount.
All right, this next one is kind of just related to that one. Are applicants required to provide 25% of the funding for the project?
We want you to show that there is financing available for the project in excess of 0%. Now, if you come to the table of 10 or 20%, that's probably going to be pipeline eligible. 20 to 30 or 21 to 30%. That's now we're entering the threshold of this could be an eligible applicant, depending on the scope of the project. Like if you're only talking about you have 20% of financing for a $600,000 project, that's going to be a little tough, especially when you consider that the grant is only $250,000. So for a $600,000 project, you'd actually have to come up with $350,000. So we look at the scope the size and scope of the project, and then from there, determinations of eligibility are made based off the, based off the contribution, right? Because a smaller contribution is easier to accept for a smaller project, not for a larger project. But if you can demonstrate 30 to 50%, contribution, that's fantastic. If you have all the money available, now we're really talking. We of course want to make sure that people that don't have all the financial resources have access to the grant. So we don't just want to give the grant to people that already have money in the first place. But I say all this to say, come to the table with what you have, and then we'll see. If you really truly do not have any money whatsoever, that is when I would say this isn't the right time to apply. But most people have something. Apply with what you have, and then we'll see.
Thank you. Roughly what percentage of applicants end up being selected each round?
Hard to determine. It differs by round. One round, I think we selected about, just because of the circumstances of the time, like 50%. Back when NOF was first instituted and we got thousands of applications in the first 3 rounds, we had to be very careful because, we had so many applications, but we could only make so many selections. So it went through a few rounds of reviews, as you all can imagine. So back then it was probably about 9%, 5 to 9% per round. It's been a little bit more in the succeeding rounds per year, but it's still a competitive process. Really, that question depends on how many applications we get in the first place. If we only get like 50, then we're going to be selecting like 25, and that's or 15%, right? Sorry, 15 applicants out of 50, so that's going to be closer to 30%. But if we get 1,000 applicants and we only select 15, that's a relatively low percentage. So it really depends on the volume.
All right, we are a bit over time. I think we can handle a few more questions. So we're just going to wrap it up in order to respect everybody's time. But do want to get to these last 8 are still open. So local ownership of a national franchise. Is local ownership of a national franchise eligible?
Depends on the franchise. McDonald's probably not. But if it's a local franchise with like 2 to 3 locations, I think that's okay. In general, though, we try to stay away from chains. We have done Culver's. We've done Culver's near the Pullman Center, so this falls into the theme of just apply and see what happens. But in general, we try to stay away from national chains, even if they're franchisees.
All right. If the applicant is a GC, can you GC your own project?
Yeah, but we're going to be paying attention to exactly what the flow of money is, because what a lot of people mean is they're just going to take money from their personal account and put it into their GC account and get reimbursed for that. And that's essentially you just moving funds. It's not necessarily paying for the project. So you can GC your own project, but we're going to scrutinize payments to the subs a lot more than we would with a project that's not being self-GC'd. AKA make sure to pay the subs, and we're going to be looking at material costs as well.
Right. Besides being insured, I think in licensed they meant, but besides being insured and licensed, are there any other requirements for the construction company and general manager?
No, but make sure that they are aligned with your project vision. A lot of GCs will try to impose their own desires on a project, so to speak. That's why we encourage the bid letting process and actually mandate it. You need to get, if you're selected to the program, you need to get 2 bids. When you apply, you don't necessarily need 2 bids. But yeah, that's why we want people to make this process competitive, because it's you're paying someone thousands of dollars to rehab your property. You want to make sure that they're aligned with what you actually want. So just make sure that you find the right GC. Other than that, licensed by the city of Chicago and insured is what we're looking for.
Right. Is there a max percentage for acquisition? Used to be 50%.
So the acquisition, that's going to be calculated along with the eligible costs. So there's not necessarily a max percentage, but in the way that we pay out the acquisition, it's going to be a certain percentage of the eligible costs. So there's not a hard number for that. It kind of goes into what is the exact contribution percentage? I don't know the exact contribution percentage because they need to see the numbers. Same thing with acquisition. So acquisition works the same way in that it could be the credit for acquisition can be applied as coverage for the actual project itself, but the percentage is going to be based on the actual total project costs themselves.
Does the grant include property acquisition of a mixed use?
Yes.
Can the grant be used in conjunction with rehabbing land bank property?
I would need to know what is meant by land bank property. Like we have had projects that we're trying to acquire property from the Cook County Land Bank to rehab it. So we have allowed those types of applications into the program in the past. From our experience, trying to buy anything from the Cook County Land Bank is an extremely long process. It could take years. So that's why we're probably not going to be selecting too many of those projects, if any. But yeah, I mean, if you apply for for the property and you acquire this property from the Cook County Land Bank and the deed is yours, and that's fine. Now, if you're a lessee working out of a Cook County Land Bank property that they will continue to own, I'm actually not entirely sure. We would have to look into that.
And on that, I will put all of our I will put all of our email addresses in the chat in case you want to talk to any of us one-on-one in more detail. So those are in the chat right now. The map. Oh yes, about the map issues, we are working on it. Go ahead and reach out to us to check your property for the next. I don't know. It should be wrapped up by the end of the day, and I'll sort it out, I believe.
Yep, we're working on it. So thank you all for those questions.
Yes, thank you for bringing it to our attention. And then last one, building purchase price, $100,000 max.
We don't have a max for the building purchase price.
All right, and that is all of our written questions.
Awesome. Well, we are over time. So I do appreciate all the questions. Those are great questions. Thank you all for attending and participating, being active and engaged, and asking some questions I never even heard before that were really informative. I really hope that if you feel like this is aligned with what you need, that you apply. And we all look forward to reviewing your applications. So again, thank you so much, everybody. I do appreciate it. All right. Have a good day.